Okay, so we are recording now. Thank you for asking that, Tan. So according to a study by the National Association of Colleges and Employers, there are 8 characteristics that we know employers are looking for in new hires. So they are critical thinking, communication, teamwork, leadership, technology, professionalism, career and self-development, and equity and inclusion. And I think that it's really important for students to know about these ahead of time for a couple of reasons. Number one, when those businesses were surveyed, they responded that they felt only 11% of college graduates actually possess these skills. And we know that that's not accurate, especially our UHD students. I know all of you are so involved in things. You are already working. You have, families and children that are depending on you. You may have done internships or volunteer work. You're involved in student organizations or programs, just like Pathways. So there are things that you're doing where you are definitely utilizing these skills in your daily routine. So the problem is that these skills aren't being conveyed in your application materials, like your resume. So we want to make sure that in our resume, we are showing that we have utilized these skills in the different roles that we've held. And also, I think it's really important. So often students will come to me and say, Miss Lisa, I want to go into teaching, but all of my experience has been in retail. So how do I convey my retail experience in a way that, a hiring manager for a school district is going to value? So my answer to that is to reflect these skills within your resume. In retail, you're utilizing critical thinking if you have a customer with an issue that needs to be resolved. You're utilizing communication with customers and coworkers. You are in a team environment, so you're practicing that teamwork. Maybe you have a supervisor that's absent and you've got to step up and take charge, which would be practicing that leadership skill. So there are definitely things that you are doing where you are showcasing these skills. And so we want to make sure that you go back and look through your resume to make sure that you demonstrated these skills somewhere within your documents. And if there's an area where you feel like maybe you are struggling, then that's also something to think about. We have these checklists on our website called the 4-year checklists. And what they do is offer some different activities and things that you can be doing to build and develop these skills. So if you are, not the most tech savvy person, for example, we have some ideas of things that you can do to build that technology skill. So this is just something that's really important. We like to, be able to share this with students in pretty much every presentation that we talk about, just because it's so, so important. So are there any questions for me about the skills that we know employers are looking for? Do any of these terms need a little bit of further explanation? No? Okay. Well, then we will move on to the next screen. If it'll go. There we go. So the overview of a resume. So the resume really has a couple of purposes. Number one, it's meant to get you an interview. And that's something to keep in mind because you have to be able to sell your personality when you get to that interview. So it's not just always what you have on paper. We can be the most qualified candidate, but we have to showcase that personality as well when it comes to the interviewing. So really, the resume, aside from landing you an interview, is meant to be your marketing tool. It is kind of like a personal billboard that's going to showcase your experiences, your skills, your education, and just really why you're a good fit for whatever position it is that you are applying for. And one thing that's really important is that we want for your resume to really distinguish you from the other applicants. So we know that many of you have had similar experiences, maybe in observation hours or projects that you've worked on, but I really want for you to focus on what you've accomplished as you've been in the different roles that you've had. we want for you to think more accomplishment oriented than task oriented, if that makes any sense. So really start to kind of brainstorm, what have I accomplished in this role in my student organization, or what have I accomplished in this role as a pathway student? So think about the things that set you apart from everyone else. And then of course, we also want for your resume to be professional in appearance. This is really a good indicator of your level of professionalism. It's that first impression that the hiring manager is getting. And for my education students, having a professional resume is so important because we are teaching language arts to students. And so they're going to look at spelling, grammar, all sorts of things like that in your resume. So we definitely want to make sure that it looks neat and that it's easy to read and that it's grammatically correct. So just some things to think about. Now we're going to talk about the content area in your resume. So this right now would be a good idea if you have your resume handy to go ahead and take a look at it and just kind of compare and contrast what you already have. So we're going to start with our required information. So first of all, your name is going to be a required section, your contact pieces. If we are applying for something, we definitely want for that person who's reviewing our resume to be able to contact us if they're interested in an interview. So we want for your name to stand out. We usually suggest that it be between 18 and 20 point and bold. And then for our contact pieces, we want to include the city and state where we're located. We don't need to include the full physical address, just the city and state. We need a telephone number that we're going to answer. And that's important when you are applying for positions, that you make sure when you get a phone call, even if it's from a number that you don't recognize, that you still answer the call. If it is somebody who is spam calling you about your car's warranty, you can always hang up really quickly. But if it's somebody who's calling you for an interview, you don't want to miss that opportunity. Many times I've had students come to me to say that they had a chance to answer the phone and just didn't because they didn't recognize the number. And then the person who called, they were never able to get a hold of again. So you want to make sure when you are applying for something, you answer your phone. If you have a LinkedIn account, you can include the URL to your LinkedIn page. If you don't, then I suggest that you get one. We know that about 83% of hiring managers use LinkedIn to research applicants. So when you're applying for something, most likely people are trying to learn more about you. And the number one thing they look for is LinkedIn. If you don't have a LinkedIn account, what they go to next statistically is Facebook. So if you're not so proud of your Facebook profile, then you definitely want to consider creating a LinkedIn page. And I believe that I'm doing a presentation for all of you on LinkedIn next month sometime. So if that's something that you need help or support with, then definitely make sure you participate next month in those workshops. And then we also want to make sure that we have a professional sounding email address. There's a statistic that says, I think 26% of hiring managers choose not to interview somebody based on their email address alone. So if you don't have a professional sounding email address, it's time that you create one. And I have seen everything from Chubby Bear, this and that, to Cuppy Cake or Sweetie Pie. I had a social work student whose email was Boogers Yo. And I remember seeing that on his resume and just asking him about it. And he said, well, this is the email address I created in middle school, and I've just never gotten another one. And I understand. I had one of those silly middle school email addresses too. But when we are starting to promote ourselves as professionals, then we need to have an email address that maybe just has something like our name. So something simple, and it's so easy to create a new Gmail email address. So if you don't have a professional email address, definitely create one. Students will ask me, is it okay to use my student email address? It is okay to use your student email address. You just want to make sure that when you're applying for positions after you graduate, that this is an account that you're going to be checking regularly. You know, sometimes after we graduate from college, we don't really go back to that college email account that we used to use. So just make sure that it's an email address that you are checking on a regular basis. Now we're jumping into the summary. So if it's been a while since you've put a resume together, you may remember something that was called the objective statement. So the objective statement really tells the reader what type of work that you are applying for. And the reader already knows that because you've applied for their position. So it's kind of a waste of space. And that's why we have changed that objective to what we now call a summary. So a summary is 2 or 3 sentences that highlight 4 key areas. So those areas are going to be your education, your relevant experience, your skills, and your career plans or passions. So for my teachers, I really like for you to emphasize when it comes to that career plans or passions piece, that you talk about the values that you want to display in your classroom. What kind of experience do you want for your students to have? What are some of the causes that are really close to your heart when it comes to being the manager of your classroom? So think about those things. We've given you an outline here. It doesn't have to be exact, but this will just kind of give you an idea of how you would structure a summary if you've never written one. So the next thing that we want to talk about is the skills section. So the skills section should be limited to what we call hard skills. So hard skills are those skills that can be proven or tested right away, such as being able to speak a foreign language or utilize a certain electronic device. Many times we will see students that use this section to discuss what we call soft skills. Soft skills are personal characteristics like being a good listener, being empathetic. Those are things that would take time to prove to somebody. If you say, well, I'm a very empathetic person, it's going to take time for somebody to see that empathy in practice. So those types of soft skills, while we know employers want them, they do not belong in this section on your resume. Instead, those people skills belong either in the summary section or somewhere incorporated in the bullet points when we're talking about the roles that you've held. So the skills section, things that you could have here would be foreign languages. If you speak Spanish, for example, you can say that you speak Spanish and indicate whether you are able to speak, write, and read it, or all 3. If you have some certifications, maybe you have CPR, first aid, you know, those are going to be valuable for working with kids. You can list those in your skills section. If there's any sort of tech devices that you know how to utilize, like smart boards or tablets, you know, with the pandemic, education has really become, you know, very tech savvy and hybrid. And so if there's any sort of technology that you feel would be beneficial to know for a classroom, that's an example of something that you could list. You can also talk about particular skills for a classroom environment, like being good at curriculum development, or maybe assessment preparation, or maybe there's a certain population of student that you've worked with, like ESL, or maybe you've worked with children with Down syndrome. So you can list things like that within the skills section on your resume. So do I have any questions about hard skills, what that means, and maybe some more examples of what could go within this section? Any questions for me? No?
I just had a quick,
Yes, go ahead. Go ahead.
Quick question. I know you sort of like commented on it, like the tech savvy part. So could that be also like if you are familiar with, you know, like PowerPoint, Excel?
Yes. Oh, yes, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, Zoom, we're all familiar with Zoom, right? And that's become an element, you know, that's been utilized in the classroom. So definitely, it doesn't just have to be, you know, a piece of equipment like a computer. It can be software programs as well.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. Any other questions for me?
What about LinkedIn Learning? Is that something that the students should be looking into?
Yes, I think LinkedIn Learning is exceptional. So if you all don't know about LinkedIn Learning, it's something that UHD students have access to. And there are a number of courses in the system on everything from tech programs to customer service skills. There's just so many different courses that are available to you. And so if you take some LinkedIn Learning courses, you can either list them as a certification, for example, if the course offers a certificate. You could have a subcategory for trainings, maybe. So like we have the language certifications, technology subcategories, you could have one for trainings and be able to list the titles there. So that's definitely something to consider. I also think if you have a LinkedIn profile, you can add some of those things to your LinkedIn profile as well.
Is there a way that you can, I mean, you're sharing the screen, so that's great. Can you share LinkedIn and a little bit about LinkedIn and then LinkedIn Learning as well? Since we're recording, we'll be able to show the students, okay, so you weren't able to come, but here are some tools and resources that you can use, especially LinkedIn Learning, like you said, that is so important. So would you be able to give us like a quick LinkedIn run through and then maybe like a quick LinkedIn Learning run through?
I can, although like I said, we're doing LinkedIn presentations for Pathways next month. So I don't want to cut into that because then I don't want for anyone, I don't want for anyone to get repetitive information and be like, oh, what's the point of me being here today? Yeah, so definitely. So I'm going to save that as hopefully anticipation that you all will come to the next to the next workshop so that we can go over your LinkedIn profile and LinkedIn Learning a little bit more in depth. So, but yes, but excellent consideration. So thank you for asking about that. So any other questions for me about skills or even the summary section that we've gone over so far? Okay, well then we are going to jump next into education. So we want to list the name of the university as well as the city and state where it's located. Even though Houston is a part of our name, we still want to indicate that our university is located in Houston, Texas. We want for you to consider your degree as a title. So you all are Bachelor of Arts in Education candidates. And then when you graduate, you will be a Bachelor of Arts in Education. So until your degree is earned, you are a candidate. Once it is earned, you can take that away. We also want for you to list the month and year of your expected graduation. So rather than saying when you started the program, you're going to just list that month and that year that you expect to finish. And then some of the things that you can have on your resume, they're not required, but they are some options that you may want to consider. If you have a GPA that's above a 3.5, that will definitely showcase that you are a strong student. And keep in mind, if your overall GPA is not above a 3.5, but your major GPA is, so let's say you have over a 3.5 in your education courses, then you could choose to list your major GPA rather than your cumulative. If you've received any honors like Dean's List or President's List or Honor Roll, you can include those as well as the semesters that you received them. If you've received an award for a student org that you've been involved in, maybe you got a scholarship, those are some things that you can include too. Activities, you all definitely want to list that you're members of the Pathways program. If there are any other student orgs that you're a part of, you can list those. And if you have some sort of position, like maybe you have an officer role, you can definitely list that on there as well. And then if you would like, you can list some relevant courses. I think this is especially helpful. Let's say some of you are choosing to apply for like a teacher's aide position or maybe some sort of after school care. Then you can list some of the courses that you've taken just so that they can see that you've had that experience, with kids rather than having to kind of guess some of the classes that you would have taken as an education student. So that's just an option, but these are some of the things that you can include within the education section. So, but for sure, we have to have the name of the university and its location, the title of your degree, and when you expect to graduate. So these are just some of the pieces that go into it. Any questions about the education section? Okay, then you see one of the optional sections that we have on our resume is the study abroad. So if you've participated in a study abroad experience, you can go ahead and include that on your resume. You see, we ask you for the name of the university, the country, where it was located, when it was that you participated in that. And then we really like for you to talk about what you accomplished from that experience. So were you trying to master a foreign language? Were you learning about teaching practices in another country? Whatever it was that was accomplished in this experience is what you're going to write about. So that is an option. It's not required, but like I said, if you have that, that's definitely something that you can include on your resume, especially knowing that employers are interested in that equity and inclusion skill that we just talked about a couple of slides back. Then this is something good to have on your resume. Another option is relevant projects. And I have had some education students that have had to, add things here just to kind of add some more experience on their resume. So I've had some students that helped with like grant writing for programs at schools. I've had some students write about projects that they did for a class where maybe they were putting a lesson plan together and coming up with activities. So if there's a project that you've done that relates to education, then you may want to have that section on your resume. Again, that's just something that's good if you don't have a lot of experience. Then next, we want to have experience on our resume. So I like for my teaching candidates to call this teaching experience. And this is where you're going to talk about any experiences that you've had with children. It could be as a volunteer Bible study teacher. It could be as a babysitter, which we can call you a child care provider rather than a babysitter. It could be a part-time job that you have. It could even be as a parent. If you have kiddos, we can also call you a child care provider because even in those roles, we're doing things. We're having to, teach the kids that are around us, stimulate their social development. And, we do things like read to them and play games with them and, maybe take them on trips and things like that where they're learning. So there's definitely experience that all of you can list within this section of your resume. So again, I do like for you to refer to it as teaching experience so that catches their attention right away. And again, just keep in mind that it doesn't have to be paid experiences. It can be volunteering roles. It could be an internship. It could be, providing care for children within your family structure. So any experiences with kids, paid or unpaid, can go in this section. Then if we have other experiences that don't relate to working with children, so I mentioned retail, for example, if you've worked in a restaurant or retail or, any other position that would be outside of teaching, then we can have a section for other experience and be able to list the name of the business where we were working, the city and state where it's located, the title that we had, the months and years that we were in that role. And then again, really focusing on the accomplishments rather than the tasks. And I always like for my education students, going back to the teaching experience section, when you're talking about working with children, I always encourage you to list the number of children that you worked with, as well as their ages or grades, so that can be seen by the person who's reading your resume. So just something to keep in mind. And then the last thing that you see at the bottom as an option is volunteering. So if you have volunteered, let's say with like the Houston Food Bank or an animal shelter, then you're going to list the name of the organization, the position that you held, like volunteer, and then the years that you have volunteered with that organization. Now, I will encourage you all, if you've done any sort of volunteering with children, make sure to incorporate that into your teaching experience rather than in your volunteering section. This volunteering section is going to be for times where you performed some sort of community service where you weren't engaging with children. So let's say you were cleaning a park or cleaning a beach or packaging food for, those that are hungry. Those are going to be more like volunteering experiences. If you spent a few hours reading to children at your local library, I would rather you include that as a teaching experience rather than a volunteering role. So any questions about that, about experiences or volunteer work or projects, or anything that we've discussed regarding content for the resume? No? All right. Well, then we will move on. So now I want to talk to you about formatting. So remember, formatting is that first impression that they're getting of your level of professionalism. And so we want to make sure that our resume looks neat and clean. So we want to use bullet points rather than paragraphs. Studies show that when someone is reading a resume that they are discouraged by paragraphs. So we want to make our writing on a resume as concise as possible by using bullet points. And we do encourage you to use 5 bullets or less per role. Studies show that the person who's reading your resume does not want to read past that 5th one. So try to be concise and really showcase those accomplishments in 5 or less bullet points. Now we want to keep your resume to about a page. So there are different things that we can do. We can adjust our margins. For example, if we're starting to bleed onto a second page, we can adjust our margins. They can be as small as 1/2 inch and as large as 1 inch. We can also adjust our font size so we can keep our font somewhere between 10 and 12 point. Again, we don't want to crowd the page, but there are some things that we can do to kind of structure it so that we can try our best to keep it to 1 page. You want to choose your font wisely, something that's easy to read. So nothing too cartoon-like or bubble-ish or script-ish, just something that's pretty clean and simple. We want to use reverse chronological order when we're putting our resume together. So what that means is that our most recent experiences are going to go on top. And we want to eliminate any experiences on our resume that are older than 10 years. So just something to keep in mind. We want to be consistent with our layout. So use, bullets consistently, use periods consistently, lines of white space in between sections. If we're just going to do 1 line of white space, we need to make sure all sections only have 1 line. If section headings are going to be capitalized, bolded, and underlined, then we need to make sure they all look that way. So consistency is very important. And those sections should be easy to identify. So studies show that someone who's reading your resume takes only 6 seconds to read it. So we want to make that resume as easy as possible for somebody to find the information that they're looking for. So let's say, for example, that they want to just look at your education section. We want to make sure that that education stands out from the other sections on your resume. So each section heading, we usually suggest to capitalize it, bold it, and underline it so that it's easy for them to go to whichever section they want. We don't want for you to have any pictures, graphics, or colors on your resume. And that will also kind of lead me to talk about templates. There are a lot of templates out there. Microsoft Word has some. You can find others online. So these are usually templates that just tell you, kind of prompt you on what to fill in. So what happens is that a lot of schools use something called an applicant tracking system because they're getting hundreds, if not more, applicants for 1 position. And so they use this software that scans your resume for keywords. So it is determining whether you are qualified for a position or not by looking for very specific words that are going to be included in your resume. So this is one reason why I always encourage students, when you're putting a resume together, be sure and look at the job description for the position you're applying to make sure that those keywords are included. And that's something that I can help you with too. If you're applying for something and you're not quite sure, which words would be considered keywords, I can help you. Those are going to be words that are most likely repeated or are industry specific for education. So, but what happens with these applicant tracking systems, going back to that, is when you use a template, they don't like that. The applicant tracking systems want as small of a file as possible. So when you use a template, it creates a bigger file. And sometimes your resume doesn't load properly and you're automatically disqualified from a job simply because your file was too large. So that's why we encourage you to just have something simple. You're going to format it yourself manually using bold, capitalization, underlining, things like that, so that it looks, a little more organized, but maybe isn't exactly in line with what a template would have. So are there any questions about the applicant tracking systems, resume formatting, anything that we've discussed so far? Okay. So let's jump into how to write a bulleted statement. So I did talk to you all about focusing on the accomplishments rather than just the tasks. And so we kind of have a little formula that we like to show students that we call the STAR: situation, task, action, and result. So when you are putting a bullet point together, you're going to start with a strong action verb. So we have a list of action verbs on our website. So if you go to uhd.edu/career, on our homepage, there's a menu and you will see a tab that says resume, CV, cover letter. So if you click there, it's going to give you some different resources for putting your resume together. And one of those is an action verb list. So if you need help with that, because I can tell you as somebody who reviews resumes pretty frequently, we don't like it when students use the same action verbs over and over. One that I see so commonly is provide. We want for you to kind of mix it up a little bit. And again, think industry specific. So words like teach, educate, guide, things like that, that would align, nicely with the teaching industry. So we want to start with that action verb. Then we want to lay out the situation or task. So what is it that we did? What were we involved in? What were the skills that we used? And then we want to highlight the result. So what was the outcome of the work that we did? And we want to quantify when we can with numbers, dollars, percentages, frequencies like daily, monthly, weekly, things like that. So we know employers really are looking for that. Really anyone who's reading a resume is going to be looking for those results, those outcomes. So you see here at the bottom, we have an example for you of what a bulleted statement would look like following this formula. So tutored an 8th grade student in pre-algebra using teacher's curriculum to raise her grade from a C to B+ over the course of a year. So see, we've got our action verb there at the beginning, tutored, and then we lay out the situation. We're working with an 8th grade student in pre-algebra using the teacher's curriculum. And then our result is that we were able to raise her grade from a C to B+ over the course of a year. So see, it's got all of the pieces in it, and it really is just much more accomplishment focused than if we said tutored student, right? So we lay out all of the details there and what was the result of the work that we did. And that's really what I want to emphasize to all of you. You all are doing such great things in the roles that you have, and it's worth it to take the time to really emphasize what your work is accomplishing. I'll give you another example. Many times on resumes, I will see answered telephones, just those 2 words. And my challenge to students will usually be, what's the purpose of answering a telephone? Is it to provide customer service so that you meet the customer's needs and keep them repeating business? There's a goal behind the action. So I want for all of you to think about it from that perspective. And if there's something, that you're trying to put together and you need help, maybe thinking about the accomplishments, I can definitely support you with that. So don't feel afraid to reach out to me for help with this. I know it's not easy. So this is something, that I would be happy to help you all with. So any questions about accomplishment statements, and how to kind of formulate those bullet points for your resume. Okay. Now we're going to jump into some do's and don'ts. So make sure that you read application materials before drafting your document so that you know what to include. So I encourage you, again, look at the job description, look at the website of the organization that you're applying to. If you're applying for a job with the district, for example, look at their mission statement, look at their values if they've got those listed. Maybe research news stories about what they're doing in the community or projects that they're involved in. Customize your skills and experiences for the teaching industry. So really focus on the experiences and the skills that you've had that align with teaching. Research specific district requirements so that you can make sure that you indicate that you have those qualifications. Spell checking is so important for my education students. Again, when you're going to be expected to teach that to your students, they want to make sure that you are showcasing that professionalism in your own document. So double check, triple check, get somebody else to take a look at it, and don't just count on the word spell check program. I can give you some examples. I had a student who, in the summary of their resume, wanted to write that they were proactive, but what they wrote instead was that they were provocative. They mean two very different things, and they're both words that exist, and so spell check did not catch provocative, but that was not the message that this student was trying to get across. I also had a student whose resume I reviewed that wanted to say that they were focused on equality in the classroom, and what they wrote instead of equality was equine, which means working with horses. Very different words. Like I said, they're both words that exist in the dictionary, so word spell check is not going to catch that. But that's why sometimes you need another set of eyes to look for spelling errors or grammar errors, because the programs are not going to always catch that. So get someone to double check. You want to avoid personal pronouns like I, me, or my. So on the resume, we're speaking from third person perspective. Then some don'ts, as I mentioned, you don't want to have grammar or spelling mistakes. You don't want to list any sort of identifying information like your social security number, your age, or your marital status. Of course, every so often I have students that want to teach abroad. So if you are looking at teaching abroad, there's a website called Going Global, GOINGLOBAL.com. And it's a website that talks about different requirements for applying for positions in multiple countries. So if you were considering applying for a teaching position abroad, then some of those countries may require some of these identifying information pieces. But here in the US, we don't want that information, so leave it off. We don't want to have references on our resume or the statement, references available upon request. That is just a waste of space. And most likely when we are applying for a position, we're going to be asked for references within the application itself, or they will want it as a separate document. So we don't want to put that on the resume. And then we don't want to lie about our experiences. I have had students that have come to me and said, hey, I used to work for this business that no longer exists. So if I said I was a manager, nobody would know, right? Well, Houston is a big city, but you never know. Someone who's reading your resume may say, oh, I remember that business. My friend used to work there, and be able to verify whether you really were a manager or not. So we want to be honest about our experiences. We can definitely hype them up when we're talking about the accomplishments that we achieved, but we don't want to lie about any of the experiences that we've had. Then I want to talk to you a little bit about transferable skills. So as I mentioned, there are certain keywords for the teaching industry. So think about the work that you've done. Even in roles that don't relate to teaching, you can change the language a little bit so that it does sound like something where you would be utilizing teaching skills. So the example that we have here is, instead of stating that you answered phones in the returns department, you could say something like, advised customers on return options and policies available while utilizing courtesy and professionalism. So that word advised is going to be one of those keywords that would be applicable for the teaching industry. So really think about that. And we've given you some examples of words that you could use: advise, evaluate, manage, create, persuade, coach, implement, inspire, and then of course, teach, educate, guide. So there's so many words that you can utilize. But this is just one way that, you know, we can show you how to take the things that you've done that maybe are not industry specific and kind of reword them so that they do sound more applicable for teaching. Then I wanted to show you all some examples of different education pieces that I've seen. So these actually come from resumes that I've reviewed. So you see here at the top, we have a teaching experience, Northline Elementary School. Managed classroom of 20 fourth grade students in general math and science studies, ensuring academic success through engaging teaching methods and monitoring assignment completion. So that's got all of the pieces that we want for that accomplishment statement. Then you've got, let's see, volunteering, Gators Serve Day, built benches and mini libraries for elementary schools. So see, we're not really talking about engaging with the kids, but we are doing something for them. And so we can go ahead and list that as a volunteering experience. Legislative simulation project member. So here's a project. Composed bill to improve health education by focusing on nutrition education in elementary to secondary schools. Then we've got this statement that came from somebody's summary. This was just one line. Experienced teaching assistant dedicated to providing quality education for underprivileged and diverse groups. So see, this person had a very specific focus. They wanted to work with underprivileged youth. We've got this AmeriCorps Vista, Texan French Alliance for the Arts Ambassador. So see, not exactly a teaching role, but this person was applying for a teaching job. So educated 60 local students on refugee struggles, bridging child-to-child connections. So we used a word that aligns with the teaching industry, and we're able to kind of change that around so that it sounded more applicable. Then you see at the bottom employment. So this was a babysitting job, the Clayton family childcare provider. Interacted with children through games, puzzles, and music to encourage productive learning and facilitate development of social and verbal skills. That sounds much better than just saying babysat, right? So see, we can take those experiences and really make them sound professional for your resume. So I have no doubts that all of you can do this within your own resumes. And I want to encourage you all to upload your resume so that I can take a look at them for you. So we have this system called Jobs for Gators. Every student has an account. So all you have to do is just activate it. Go to this website here, tinyurl.com/UHDJ4G, or you'll see this Jobs for Gators logo on our website, which again is uhd.edu/career. And so when you click on the link that says student/alumni login, you'll go to a sign-in page. And what you will do is just enter the username and password that you use for Blackboard, and that will get you into the system. If you've never been in it before, it's going to ask you some questions to get your profile set up. And then once that's done, on your homepage, there's going to be a menu. And one of the tabs will say Documents. And that's where you can click to upload your resume so that I can take a look at it for you and give you some feedback via email. That's also a place where you can schedule a coaching appointment. So if you want to actually have some one-on-one time to talk about, you know, what could go in your resume, you can schedule a coaching appointment with me through this system as well. So everyone should go and activate your Jobs for Gators accounts. It's a really great system that not only allows for you to upload documents for review or schedule coaching appointments, but it also has events listed that we have planned. So you can RSVP for our events like career fairs. It has a mock interview module. So if you have an interview coming up, you can practice interviewing in the system. There's one uploaded for teaching. So it's pre-recorded questions, and it will record your responses and then send it to me so that I can review that and give you some feedback. So it's got some really great tools within the system. So I do encourage all of you to check it out if you've not done so already. And then finally, I have a survey for you. So if you wouldn't mind taking the time to just kind of say how I did. So we have the link here, tinyurl.com/CDC Pilot. And when it asks you what program you attended, you'll select resume and cover letters. I know we didn't go over cover letters, but it's the same question. So you'll select resume and cover letters in the drop-down menu. So I'll leave that up for just a second. And then I will go ahead and stop sharing and see if we have any questions in the chat. You can also feel free to unmute your mics if you've got any additional questions about anything we just talked about. Okay, so let me see. Do we have anything in the chat? Okay. No, it doesn't look like it. Are there any questions for me before we wrap up today?
When submitting a resume, is it best to submit a resume in Word or PDF form?
If it's on Jobs for Gators, definitely Word format. If we're applying for a position, then I kind of think that a PDF is better just because it guarantees that your formatting is going to look the way that you intended. So that's just my recommendation. But if you wanted to go to me, then Word is so much easier for me so that I can make edits. But aside from that, use those PDFs.
And then another question is, are cover letters really necessary?
It really depends on the industry. So I'm going to tell you that for teaching positions, cover letters still are something that we see a lot of districts asking for. Some won't, because they'll look more at your teaching philosophy than they will your cover letter. But I always think it is a good idea to go ahead and be prepared to write one. And we do have examples on our website that kind of give you an outline of what should be included in each paragraph of the cover letter. I think that the most important pieces of the cover letter really are establishing your connection to the place that you're applying to. So why it is that you want specifically to be involved with this organization. I like to call it the kiss butt paragraph, because we're kissing the butt of the place that we are applying to. And then the other most important piece, I feel, is really providing a few good examples of how our experiences align with the qualifications for the role that we are applying to. And I say just a few examples because we want for you to give details. So if you're applying for a position that wants for you to have had assessment experience with children, for example, then we want for you to talk about, very specifics of what it was that you did, what assessment pieces were you covering, how did you, convey the preparation with students, what was the result of you, doing this. So we want for you to provide more details than perhaps were included in the resume. So that's why we say just 2 or 3 examples. So those are the most important pieces for the cover letter. But yes, it is a good idea to have one, and you will be writing a different one for every position that you apply to, because the school district or the private school or charter school, they may be asking for different things. So we want to make sure that when we write those, that we're writing to what each person is asking for. So
Thank
good
you.
question.
I appreciate that.
Yeah. Any other questions from anybody? All right. Well, I guess that is it then. So thank y'all so much for participating today. Like I said, we will be discussing LinkedIn next month. So definitely, I hope you all come back for that. It's such an important piece when we're applying for positions. So if you feel like your LinkedIn profile needs work, or maybe you don't have one, then you definitely want to participate in that. So I look forward to seeing all of you then. And if there's nothing else, then I hope you all have a great weekend.
Thank you, you as well.
Thank you, you too.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.